My name is Tanya Barben, formerly Simons. I'm the daughter of Ray and Jack Simons, who were political activists and went into exile, eventually into Zambia at the end of in May 1965. I remained behind in South Africa with my sister Mary. I finished my university education at UCT and I joined the staff of the university library. And then in 1976, Mary and I and a whole lot of other people on the 23rd of November were banned. Okay, I grew up a family of three children, my older sister, my younger brother and myself. We grew up in a home in Oranjezicht, which is a suburb of the City Bowl, Cape Town City Bowl. We were right up against the mountain, so I spent much of my childhood roaming the mountain, and there was a holiday house at Onrust in the Hermanus area that we used to go to. Initially we went camping in Onrust, and then later on, after my maternal grandmother passed away, she left my mother some money and they were able to buy a little house in Onrust. So my life was spent between the mountain and the sea in a way. The house was a busy one. My mother was banned for quite a while. She had been working in the union and she wasn't able to continue doing so. So there were a lot of meetings that were taking place in the house. I used to be aware of that when I came home from school because I would find my mother closeted in her study with somebody, only one person at a time. And I know that there was a time when Governor Mbeki lived in our house. My father he was teaching at the university, and he used to hold classes in the home, lecturing to young activists. This was even before MK had been founded, shortly after that. So the house was, of course, there were many times when students came to the house to see my father, and there was always a party going on at which students were present. And one met many people. I met Pello Jordan when I was a child, and Leon Levy. These just come to mind. There were many others, Sylvia Neem, L.B. Sachs, and his mother. All of a sudden I've gone blank, but there were many people I met and who remember me, even Neville Rubin, even if I don't necessarily remember them. And this all came crashing down when my father was banned. He could no longer teach at the university, and there were a number of trials anticipated, and I suppose that there was a fear that my mother would be arrested. And at the end of 76, as I said, I was banned. So I hadn't seen them since, I think, November 75. So I hadn't seen them for 6 years. And I saw them again in 82. So this was a very difficult period, not only having my parents in exile, but also being banned and not being able to work.
Tanya, can you just, for those of us who don't know, or those viewers who don't know, what did it mean to be banned?
You want to know about my restrictions? Well, I couldn't be in the company of more than one other person. I couldn't go. I was restricted initially to the Wynberg Magisterial District, and this was relaxed a bit because I was actually living in Observatory, which was part of Cape Town Magisterial District. I had to get permission to see an elderly aunt and uncle who lived in Pinelands. I had to get permission to see my sister, who was also banned. She had to get permission to see me. There were many times when we had to go off to the magistrate in Wynberg to ask for some restrictions to be lifted. I was very fortunate. I had a boyfriend who was very supportive of me. I couldn't work. I couldn't disseminate information. That was a big thing. So I couldn't work in a library, and I was a librarian. I couldn't go to a school. I couldn't go to a train station or a harbor or an airport. The usual restrictions that apply to banned people.
And during the time that you were separated from your parents, when you couldn't see them for 6 years, how old were you at that time?
Well, I was banned when I was 28, and so this continued until I was 5. Sure, I've got to work it out. 82. 34. Yeah.
And what other support systems were in place for you? I mean, it sounds like you were quite isolated because you were banned.
Well, a banned person is generally very isolated, and the tragedy is that, and I'm sure many other people will agree, that you become your own jailer because you are. The university very generously continued to pay our salaries on condition that we weren't convicted of any crime. So one was always very careful of being caught breaking the banning order, which I did on one occasion, and I appeared before a magistrate court, but I wasn't found guilty, fortunately, because I had a very good attorney or advocate who was Ian Farlam, who came to my rescue. But otherwise, I probably would have lost my income from the university.
And how did you end up becoming a librarian? Was it at the university as well?
Well, I did my first degree at the university, and then I had to do something with myself, and I studied librarianship, and I became a very happy and contented librarian at the university. And when I returned to the university after the banning order, I was a law librarian for many years, which was wonderful. And at the beginning of 1990, my parents came out of exile, and at the end of 1990, I stopped working in the law library because I had 2 very small children who were perpetually ill, and I find it quite stressful having a very, very stressful job and looking after 2 young children, and not that I blame them at all. And I took up the post of the Rare Books and Special Collections Librarian at the University of Cape Town, which is what I was when I retired at the end of 2013.
And as white South Africans, were there ever people who sort of came up against them, people who were on the same side, who questioned their involvement in the movement?
People on the same side in the movement?
Yeah.
I mean, as a child, it was quite tough for us as children because we were often ostracized by our schoolmates, and we were known as the children of those communists, you know. Certainly, when my parents went into exile, I know that quite a number of my school friends dropped off the radar. And then, of course, when I was banned, a similar situation arose.
And the schools that you were at, were there ever sort of threats being made against your parents for being involved in the movement? You know, were there ever people who, maybe neighbors or people from the community that came to confront your parents and ask them why they were involved?
Well, I'm not actually aware of that. Living in Oranjestad, I was not aware of that. I was not aware of that. I don't think they got any support from any of their neighbors at all. And it's more than likely that many of their neighbors weren't aware of exactly what was going on. You know, people live isolated lives. I mean, we played with their children because they were our neighborhood kids. But whether their parents were aware of of the extent of my father and mother's involvement, that I don't know. And my father was a university professor, so lecturer, so they must have been aware of many, many people coming to the house from different backgrounds